yet. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Witches and Wine. This is the show where we talk about witchy stuff and we drink wine. Clink and drink. Clink and drink.
Clink and drink.
Clink and drink. Oh, invisible cup. And clink and drink to you.
Salute.
Oh. My name is Lola Stardust. I am the hostess with the mostest of this show. With me, I have my wonderful husband, Silenus Stardust, my partner in crime.
Lots of crimes.
All the crimes. And I do need to do a disclaimer. This show is called Witches and Wine. We have had complaints in the past that I don't like all the wine you drink and when you get a little tipsy. So we have this wonderful suggestion. You can click the X in the corner and not watch us. Yay! It's like magic.
You have power.
Yes. So before we get started with this awesome guest I'm so excited about, I'm going to turn this over to my husband, and he's going to tell us about the wine we're drinking tonight.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So tonight, I've chosen a very unique grape for a very unique person. This is a Sagrantino, which is a grape that comes from the Umbria region in Italy. It's a bone-dry red that has all sorts of different flavors going on. You got some dark fruits, and then you have some cherry pits, and then you have a little mint flavor. You have a little jasmine green tea notes coming through. And what's so interesting about this grape is it actually survived. Is one of the few things that survived when Vesuvius erupted.
Ooh.
There was only a handful of things that lived through it, and this happened to be one of the grapes. And it is only found in this one region in Italy.
Cool.
So if you're going to try them, it's not for the faint of heart. It's a very, very complex wine. Definitely dry, so have a glass of water near you because
Yes.
you're going to be sucking on teeth for a while. Bottle's going to run about $30 a bottle. If you're going to serve it with the food, like a chicken parm would go nicely with it, or like an ossobuco.
Oh,
So I'm going to go ahead.
fancy talk.
Oh, this is fancy wine for
Woo!
fancy foods.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and step out now and have our guest or our
Co-host
come back. Long time no see. We have new rules here in Pandemic Washington that allow us to get a couple of households together in person, so we're not breaking any rules.
We're not breaking the law.
So I'm going to step out now, and here comes Zeta.
Yay! Oh my God! Stop it, puppies. We have dogs that like to bark and everything. All right.
Everything. Hello.
Welcome. I'm so glad. Yay! We get to sit next to each
People.
other. It's so weird. All right, let's introduce our guest. I'm sure if you have been under a rock, you may not know who this person is, but she has she's an author. She has an amazing YouTube channel that I just love to watch, and just so much information, so laid back, so down to earth. I'd like to welcome Thorn Mooney to our show. Hi, Thorn.
Hey, Lola. Hi, Zeta. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I actually feel kind of sheepish because I'm a big wine drinker. Dry red's my favorite. And I'm sitting here with an IPA. So I had in my house. I'm not a big beer drinker, but when I am, it's an IPA.
That's okay. We like IPAs over here too. So you're right. Any of the spirits that you want to partake in, or non-spirits, because we do have guests who don't drink. So we're like, if water is your thing, drink water. But it's always fun to have a little spirits.
I'm passionate about water.
I am too. I love water. I need it. So, okay, your show on YouTube. So this is the lady here that introduced me to you. I think you are.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
I think so.
She was like, you have to check out Thorn Mooney. I've been watching her. She's amazing. I'm like, okay, all right, yeah. And I started watching your show, and I'm like, this is like someone that I think you need to be heard in our community because you really kind of say what a lot of us are thinking. And we just, you know what I mean? Is that kind of how you feel? Like you're just kind of saying what?
I hope so. Well, I'm kind of a bad employee. I should start off by saying this is related, I swear. I have kind of a reputation in meetings. This used to happen to me when I was in school too. Like, you know how they tell you, ask the question, because if you ask the question, somebody else in the class had that question too.
Yes.
And, I just never really found that was true. And as a child, I would say the thing and be penalized for it. And then now as an adult, I work in a corporate environment. I'm a cube person, right? And I'll sit through meetings and it'll be ridiculous, like the presentation or the training or like whatever is happening. And I'll look around the room and just think, do these people know that this is ridiculous? Like, do they think that this is good?
Yeah.
Should I say that, is there something wrong with me? Maybe I'm the problem.
Crazy. That's what I was going to bring you, was your crazy pills.
We do a thing where we say, have I taken crazy pills? Because you feel like, am I the only one that's in on the secret that this is ridiculous?
Usually what I usually ask if I'm high. Like, am I high? What has happened? I sat through a meeting, like in the first 6 months of my last job, like it was a meeting about how to increase your productivity by minimizing the amount of time that you spend in meetings. And I was like,
So we're
why are we in this meeting?
I understand the irony of what is happening. Like, what? So sometimes in witchcraft spaces, in pagan spaces, I definitely have moments where I look around and I go, this thing that I want to say is obvious, right? Like, it's obvious. And sometimes I find, yes, it's a thing that other people are thinking about, but they weren't sure how to articulate or they were nervous about saying it. And other times it's like, no, oh my God, like, why do you think that? So,
right. And they throw you under the bus.
I worry about that one a lot.
They throw you under the bus.
That is part of why I'm bad at keeping up on my YouTube channel. The other part is children.
She has a house full of children.
Children is the big part.
Yeah. Yeah, so you get thrown under the bus though, right? Because that's how I'm the same way. I used to work in a cubicle job and I would go to the meetings and I'd be like, in my head, this isn't right. And then I would speak up and I'd look around like, right people, right? And they're all like, I don't know who she is.
right. It's bewildering.
It is. So you say the thing, but I really still think you say the thing, unless there's a small group of us that just, but I feel like you're hitting it on the nose when you say certain things. One of the things I loved that you said in your last video was about the, having to be the expertise in witchcraft. And you said expertise is a moving target. That just, like, I went, oh my God, yes, because what it is, you don't know what that level is. And to me, if someone thinks they can level up in what we do, I think that they have another thing coming.
Well, I think kind of the piece that we miss is that, and I think there were some folks who misunderstood me. I wasn't saying that people aren't experts or can't be experts. Yeah. I was saying that expertism is not a word. Expertise. It's relative. It's comparative. I mean, if nobody else is standing in the room with me, then I'm necessarily the expert. If I go from one space to another, it's sort of like being a teacher. I was a classroom teacher for several years, and like my job teaching high schoolers was to like know more about the Great Gatsby than my 11th graders. Okay. Right. But I don't have like a university background in like literary theory, blah, blah, blah. Like there's lots of people out there who know way more than me about the Great Gatsby. Yeah. So I'm the expert in my classroom. But if I go to some like literature conference somewhere, I transform magically into a student.
Yes. Yes.
So that's what I was getting at. And with expertise, I think maybe because we're so in love with like our labels and our titles and our degree systems, and I'm not saying those things are bad, okay? No. But I think because we're so invested in them, we do have this sort of like tacit idea that somebody hits third degree and they know everything, or somebody finishes the correspondence course and they know everything, or you've read all of the books and you know everything. And I can think of like a million aspects within witchcraft where I have so much to learn, and I think that's true about all of us.
Yeah.
So that's what I was getting at.
Well, I got it. I got the message. You can be an expertise in something, but it doesn't give you the end all be all, like, and I do not have to read another book, or I do not need to have to listen to what my student is bringing up and going, I didn't know that, which, like, right here, perfect example, right next to me, that was, oops, my notifications on my phone. She has been practicing for over 20 years, since she was like a wee child, and I'm the 3rd degree high priestess, but she still comes to me with stuff that I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that. And that's okay.
To put certain things, we have some similar 90s AOL chat room, Silver Ravenwolf backgrounds. I just then had children instead of going to school. Like,
yeah. But don't you think it's important to always be learning, as even if you're teaching, you can't teach if you aren't willing to learn. You have to be willing to learn new things.
Yeah.
We can't know all the things all the time.
Well, and I don't think we should want to. I mean, well, let me take that back, because I do kind of have this, like, I have this part of my daily, like, practice is prayer in the morning, and some of what I do is a little bit like, it's kind of like affirmation recitation, but it's really more like saying mantras. And one of the things that I repeat to myself is about having access to, like, the signs and symbols of the universe, like knowledge, access to knowledge.
Yeah.
So it is something that I aspire to, but it's also something that I'm conscious that I just can't. Like, you can't know everything. So it seems like kind of, I don't think that should be the thing necessarily that it's not that we shouldn't aspire to it, it's that we shouldn't penalize other people for not getting there, maybe penalizing ourselves for it.
Yeah. Well, the knowledge is power, and I think it's always good to branch out and, read. For me, I love reading. I love knowledge. I'm very much like, oh my God, I need to know. I want to know. And I go down the rabbit holes because I'll read something in one book and it'll reference where they got, the references, the books.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, and I look in those references of those books and I'm like, okay, I need to read that. And then I go down that rabbit hole and then I read their references and then I go, oh, I needed that,
Mm-hmm.
But I like doing that. Some people don't, and that's okay. Some people are like, oh my God, if I have to read a book, I'm falling asleep, by page 5. So some of them are better visual learners, or some of them are better at hearing it rather than reading it. We all have our skill set, but I think you're right. It's maybe not aspiring to be a know-it-all, but aspire to have a wider,
Become more well-rounded.
Well, to segue and go into a Wayback Machine, because you also had a topic where you talked about the expert blind spot and how you sometimes need to revisit things as kind of a newbie again, and not always from the been there, done that, got the t-shirt.
Yeah.
And that way you are perpetually learning, because back in the day, it used to be said that, like, paganism was supposed to be always a hill and you were always learning. And this will show where it's from. But, those other religions, those ones plateaued.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just so, like, short-sighted and judgmental.
It really is.
It is.
Yeah.
And we learn that, and you evolve and you change. I like how you had said you keep all your old videos, even if some of them are embarrassing, so you can have, like, a timeline of where you came from and growth. It's like journals. I read back on my old journals and I look at where I was when I was in my 20s or teens to where I'm at now in my late 40s, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot of growth, and that's good. It's good to see that progress.
Well, and what's funny to me too is that it sort of related to, like, the expert blind spot. We become experts on ourselves and we forget where we've been. So kind of just on a very practical level, something that happened to me relatively recently, I was working through a course in another tradition just because I wanted to kind of, expand those horizons and push myself and do something that was uncomfortable for me. And one of the things that we were asked to do in the class was swap ritual tool associations in the circle. And I'm used to, like, you know, the Golden Dawn kind of system. And I was being asked to switch, like, the wand and the athame. And I was like, well, this is, right? Like, I can't do this. This is like, the blade always goes in the east, la, la, la. Okay. And I mean, I did it, right? But I was uncomfortable. But what was so funny is that afterwards, I have a habit of going through old journals, and I wasn't looking for anything, but I was kind of reading for something else. But I found a journal that I kept when I was in college, and I used that swapped elemental association.
Yes, I've done it with these too.
I like completely blocked this whole phase of my life where I wasn't putting my blade in the east, right? Like, here I was, like, approaching 40, and I'm just like, I've always done things this way, la, la, la. No, you fucking have not.
Yeah.
So, and that's a little example, but it's things like that. And when it comes to, like, and for folks who maybe haven't seen, the expert blind spot is basically what happens when you have been doing something for so long, you know, like, I don't know, like, you're a blacksmith and you craft tools and you've done this for years and years and years, and you go to teach somebody else to be a blacksmith and you forget the most basic steps. Like, you don't know how to start to teach them because you can't remember a point in your life where you didn't know how to do some fundamental thing. And that's what happens in, I think, in craft teaching environments. Folks who, not even necessarily, like, coven leaders, yes, but anybody, I think, who occupies a teaching role or a leadership role. You know, we read our Scott Cunningham or whatever the hell it was coming up on 30 years ago, everybody.
Yeah.
Like, I think we forget how long ago that was. And if you have not read a beginner book since then, or if you have not read a beginner book that was written in the last few years, let me tell you, they are so different.
Oh, yeah.
What I had, it is night and day. And so as a coven leader, and I'm not saying that we need to, like, toss out how we do things or whatever, but if you want to relate to people who are approaching witchcraft now, you read the things that they're buying, they're being exposed to. You know, like, you can't teach children without reading the books that kids, like, you know, you read comics, you read YA, you read whatever.
Yep.
And it's true in witchcraft too. Like, I'm not a beginner, I don't need to read this. Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it evolves. I mean, with the craft is evolving, and that kind of brings me to my next point. Where this is such a weird thing to say, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Do you think Wicca is just not woke anymore? You know what I'm saying? Like, is it, you know, the word woke?
Okay.
Like, yeah. Do you? I'm making sure because I never knew the word woke until I realized that people that are woke, as much as I understand what they're woke about, it was still irritating me because I'm an old, stuck in my way, like, that's not how I'm going to do my craft. But I feel Wicca, because you did a series or a thing on why you're still Wiccan and why people attack Wicca so much. Do you think that's a big part of it? Because it is the gender issues and do you see it evolving into something that's more doable in this day and age?
So there's a few things happening, a couple parts that I want to address if I can remember. Firstly, I think we have to consider Wicca as it's existed, like, kind of from moment to moment, and realize that, like, if we look at Wicca as it was first presented, you know, in the 50s into the early 60s, and, you know, the way it's presented in England versus when it's presented in the US, like, these are different versions of Wicca. And this is not me contesting which one is the right Wicca, okay? Yeah. But at any given point, I think Wicca is progressive in that moment, right? Like, Wicca in the 1950s is very progressive for a number of reasons. And what's interesting is that the people promoting Wicca, like politically in some ways, are very conservative.
Yeah.
But they're progressive in their attitudes about sexuality. They're progressive in their attitudes about the environment. Like, and those things don't look progressive to us now. Like, we look back on that and we go like, that's a disaster. Look at how conservative that was. Yeah. And I'm not saying that we need to necessarily give people a pass for things that they could have done better, but I think it's worth looking at how in any given moment, in these early decades, like what was happening with Wicca was progressive. Like in the 70s in the United States, I mean, you're on the tail end of like, there's the counterculture, there's the sexual revolution, there's women's liberation, all this stuff happening in the 60s and 70s, and Wicca really kind of dovetails with that stuff.
Yeah.
But today, I think kind of what's happening is that there are aspects of Wicca that have never been woke, have never been progressive. And I'm thinking about racism, and I'm thinking about attitudes towards gender identity, sexuality. Like there's all kinds of things that I think have not been progressive in the ways that they could have and should have been progressive. Okay. And now we have open spaces where people are freely talking about that, where that wasn't necessarily happening 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of a collective, like white people having to pay attention, right? Like cisgender people paying attention, okay? Like straight people paying attention, finally, where, like we thought we didn't have to pay attention necessarily. Yeah. Even just like a couple of years ago, everybody, right? So, and my position has been that it's not that those things are, I think this is true about, religion as a whole. Folks might know my academic background is in religious studies, so I tend to think very broadly.
Yeah.
I kind of reject, like religion, whether we're talking about Wicca or some other tradition, is made up of the people practicing it.
Yes.
Yes.
It's always going to be a reflection of those people, right? Who they are, where they're from, their socioeconomic background, like their education, like everything about people goes into what character of the religion looks like. And I think Wicca looks different depending on who's practicing it.
Yep.
Again, I don't mean that as a judgment, but like, it's sort of like when people toss Christianity as a whole under the bus, as though Christianity is a thing. Like it's not a thing, it's Christianities, right?
Really, yes. It is true with you're looking at different versions of Wicca depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Where you are in the country and all of that.
Are you talking big house or individual congregation?
Yeah, big umbrella or small.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the first piece of it is we have to ask ourselves, we're talking about Wicca, what specifically do we mean? And that's part of it. So like, I think there are things that Wicca has to address. And in my personal experience, like kind of my coven, the covens around me, the people who are in kind of my cohort, these are things that folks are actively working on.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there are racist Wiccans, there are transphobic Wiccans, there are like you name it. There are absolutely like sexist Wiccans. I mean,
but there's that in every religion. There's always the bad seeds in every religion.
I think that's where the issue we run into when it comes to religions, because your in-group is supposed to be the good people.
Yeah.
And so my people don't do that. Those are the other people that do that. But you have to realize that once you get to a certain point, like it's going to include others as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I think so like that's the first piece is like we have to like, what do we mean when we say Wicca? And then the second piece of that, kind of getting back to what you were saying when you were introducing the question about when people criticize Wicca, and like, where does that come from? And for me, like the second component is that often what I find when people are criticizing Wicca, they're not really criticizing Wicca, they're criticizing things that have been lumped in by outsiders as what Wicca is. Like there was a blog that was circulating. It was an older blog, and forgive me, I can't. It was like kind of like one of those listicle articles.
Yeah.
And it was a couple years old, and I can't remember who it was originally posted or who wrote it, but it was basically like a list of all the things that Wicca has culturally appropriated. Okay. And this is not me saying that cultural appropriation is not a problem. It's a problem. And Wiccans culturally appropriate. Okay.
Yeah.
But the things on the list just objectively were not part of Wicca.
Yeah.
Like they were problems within like a wider sort of like new age witchcraft, whatever. So things like black salt, sage, chakras, like the list of things. And I'm thinking like, none of that is part of what I practice. And none of that was part of like how I was trained, like what this person had done. And I think what people do is they get online or they meet some Wiccans or they Google Wicca. They see lots of pictures of like young blonde women, like with sage or with crystals or whatever. They see hashtag Wicca and they think, oh, those Wiccans.
Yes.
They're not really talking to Wiccans. They're not reading Wiccan texts. They're not, and some of those folks, you know, they read Scott Cunningham, you know, years ago, but they don't realize that Scott Cunningham also doesn't look like the Wicca that many people practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that even caused its own issue because I remember there was this whole campaign at one point of the Keep Wicca Traditional. And it was basically just an entire. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gatekeeping.
Yes.
You have to stop the gatekeeping there because it was like, well, unless you're actually initiated into a coven, you can't call yourself a Wiccan. If you read Scott Cunningham, you can't possibly call yourself a Wiccan.
Yeah. And that just, to me, doesn't that just go against everything that we're trying to do as Wiccans, is be accepting and you know what I mean? And then when you start putting, oh, you're not Wiccan, or you are, but you're not. I mean, when it happens within our own belief system, it kind of makes me mad because it's going against everything why I came to Wicca in the first place.
I just think it's boring.
It's
like,
what?
I just think it's boring. Like even before we talk about like whether or not it's worth having those conversations about who's in and who's out, like for me, like, because I remember that campaign. I remember the campaign before that, whywiccansuck.com.
Yes.
And because I think the Keep Wicca Traditional like spun out of that website, and you can look at like GeoCities Wayback Machine or whatever and see it, but a lot of people don't recall that like this is where the fluffy bunny thing came from.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like it came from a place, everybody. And man, when that conversation comes up, my eyes just glaze over.
Yeah.
Or it's boring. Like even if we should be mad at that person, or even if that person is whatever, like
for me, it's like the gate's already open. What are you going to do about it? Because now if we're going to go back and say who gets to claim what title, you got to go back and go, well, do the Dianics get to claim it?
Yeah.
Do the Wiccans get to claim it? Do, you know, because there's the Long Island line, and then there's like the California line.
Oh,
and
there's
then
all
you had a whole bunch, and they kind of clung to it as part of the almost PR campaign.
Yeah.
Of like, we're not the bad guys. We're all cool. We're buddies.
Yeah.
What's funny about that is that that's a very kind of American thing to do too, in religion as a whole. Because like if you go, I've only been to the UK. I can't speak to Wicca elsewhere. But in the UK, there's much more mixing, like especially amongst even like traditional groups. And in the United States, of course, we're kind of accustomed to these conversations. We like even the term gatekeeping. I can only think of that being popular within the last year. Like that wasn't a word that anybody was using in like 1999. Like these conversations are very American. You can look at the history of like evangelicalism in the United States, which is what I spent my master's degree studying, was evangelicals. You can look at how Protestantism develops in the United States, and it is so obsessed with this idea of who's doing Christianity right. And that's not to say that Christians haven't been doing this for a long time, but there's something about the United States where people are just like rabid about it. And it happens in other groups too, like who's doing it right. And there are a number of religious studies scholars out there who point to like American individualism and this need to, you know, like kind of this sense of specialness that's sort of part of the fabric of being American, kind of coming into play in how we are religious. But it's just funny to me how Wiccans sound so much like Protestants.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, is that didn't we want to avoid this?
Well, there even was at one point, and I wouldn't be able to remember it, where somebody was talking about that online on how it's basically Wiccan's Protestant Reformation. And that was with that, I don't know if it was the Keep Wicca Traditional or the, oh, why can't I remember the other one? You just said it.
Why Wiccans suck?
The what?
Why Wiccans suck?
Yes, that one.
It was a glorious website. It even had this game, and you got to remember, it was like 2000.
Yeah.
So you can imagine like free internet games where you got to like hit a bunny with a copy of Scott Cunningham. Do you remember this? It was like whack-a-mole.
Oh
no! It was actually a really good, like, she did a very good job on this.
It was a hilarious website.
Website. Although, when you do stumble across it as someone who was a book Wiccan with no access to a coven, it was like, wait, this is a personal attack.
Yes.
On me, personally.
Well, to be clear, I am a fluffy bunny, everybody. That's fine.
I love bunnies.
Well, I wonder if it's possible to avoid those kinds of things. I wonder if it's just, I don't want to say human nature, but I wonder if it isn't like American or something. I don't know, like.
Well, okay, so for example, this has nothing to do with witchcraft, but it's American versus European. We watch the Great British Baking Show. We love it so much. We've been watching it since its beginnings, and we noticed that one of the biggest reasons why we like it is because they're so supportive and nice to each other, even though it's a competition. When you watch American shows like that, they are cutthroat. They are, you know, I'm going to win.
I hid the salt under the sink. They're never going to find the salt.
Yeah. It's like, it's terrible. So I think it's kind of similar when you talk about the American conversations of Wicca versus the European conversations. I think we as Americans, we kind of like the competition and the feeling number one and the gossipy part of it. And unfortunately, that's kind of our culture. And so it doesn't surprise me that that would be considered an American conversation.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of, you know, I mean, this is just me talking out loud, but I've wondered that. And I work for a UK company. So most of my colleagues are British, and they put the Americans in the sales roles because we're more aggressive. They do, and they do it on purpose. We are like the client facing folks because they know that the Americans will say the thing. Like my British colleagues are too polite, frankly, to do. And I'm stereotyping here, okay? But like, this is what we joke about in meetings. I'll send an American. They think they know everything. Let them do it.
It's so true.
Quick question, just as an interjection, because it came to me. Have you found that as a very public witch, have you ever found any pushback with your professional life at any point whatsoever?
No. Never. The most I've ever gotten was when I was 16 and I had, it wasn't my first job, but it was my first retail job. I was 16 years old and there was an adult man who worked at the same, it was a guitar store. And he told the boss at one point that I was a devil worshiper. But I was like, I mean, I was a good employee. So, I mean, like, I was never threatened. My job was never on the line. He just made himself look like an asshole.
Yeah.
So that happened to me when I was 16. And then when I was in graduate school, and I think we millennials call these microaggressions. I don't know. But when I was in graduate school, I very regularly got comments, never from professors, but from other students,
Mhm.
And they would say things like, but how can you be smart and be you? And it wasn't necessarily Wiccan. It was, how can you be smart and be religious?
Yeah.
Because we have this idea that religious people are idiots.
Yeah.
Like, we do. We just think that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of witches are uncomfortable being called religious.
Yeah.
I think we collectively, like, everybody wants to be spiritual, right? And it's because we think religious people are followers, religious people are uneducated, religious people can't make their own choices. Like, these are stereotypes that I think we just sort of collectively hold and have for decades.
I think it's
Anti-science kind of.
Yes, like not. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's important though. That's why it's important to have the conversations of what's going on, because we need to not have our inner witch wars with each other, and the competitiveness and the I know more than you, because we are very smart people. We're everyday people. We are people that work in banks and plumbers and teachers, and and it's, I feel like when we start attacking each other, we're kind of playing at a lower, we're diminishing ourselves and our beliefs. We're hitting low.
Well,
And
I
I
think it's kind of goofy. I mean, there's like 12 of us. Like, why? I don't know. Like, if your biggest concern is that somebody on the internet said something mean about you, like, your life is awesome.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
sorry. If your biggest concern is whether or not the coven down the street is really practicing whatever tradition they say they're like, I think everybody needs to go and like get another hobby. Maybe
Yeah.
other
It's kind of the facts of like your own, it to throw an internet term around, the check your privilege.
Yeah.
Like that's an element of privilege, and it's an element of entitlement that most people don't think of in those terms.
Yeah.
Because you're sitting there in a spot where you can actually judge people on what they're doing being wrong.
Well, and it
They
depends.
need to do it like yours.
Like, there are absolutely things that people need to point out, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to point out social injustice. We need to be pointing out transphobia and racism and sexism, right? Like, our litany of things. And that's part of that. And that stuff should be a conversation, which is also why we shouldn't be bullying each other over
Yes.
little things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you, I'm sure you are, but I hear this word tossed around a lot, and I even feel it is the imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And I don't know. Do you ever feel that way, or are you just kind of like, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, or I don't know what I don't know, or whatever, and I'm not gonna.
I have struggled with it more in the past than I do now. And that's not because I think that I'm just like so much better. It's just because I've had more therapy now than I did years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
I think imposter syndrome is very natural. I think it hits everybody at some point. And I think a lot of imposter syndrome is rooted in us telling a narrative of how we should be, and when you can put that narrative down, that's when I find the imposter syndrome, like, the volume turns down. It never goes away, but you can turn it down. Like, a good example, when I started my first group, I don't know, like, you have to have a lot of hubris to think that you should be leading other people, right? Like,
Yeah.
Like,
we're crazy.
and we do it out of love, or we do it like whatever. Like, a lot of people do it out of power or whatever, insecurity. Like, all of these things I think are a factor, and everybody has an ego. But I definitely struggled at the beginning with like, who am I to be doing this? Like, I can't believe anybody like tasked me with this. I can't believe anybody trusts me to do this. And it's part of it was because I had this narrative in my head that the high priestess is always wise, always compassionate, always perfectly like, I don't know, like, I had this kind of like Vivienne from Mists of Avalon kind of like bullshit, whatever thing in my head.
It's ironic because she's not perfect either.
Yeah.
Well, and the whole premise of the story here is like Morgaine being like, wait a second. So for the record, I'm talking about the HBO special, which I'm concerned is the canonical Miss Babylon. Okay. Marion Zimmer Bradley, may she never prosper. But like, I had that image of what the high priestess should be. And isn't it an earth-shattering experience as somebody in a coven to realize that your high priestess or whoever, your group leader, is a human being?
Yeah.
And once I shifted my narrative so that it was okay that I was a human being, the imposter syndrome volume turns down.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't mean that you get to you don't get a pass on stuff. But when I stopped, you know, having to think that I needed to be Vivienne of Avalon or whatever, like, it's harder to fail when your models are more realistic.
Yes, absolutely. And I always think, you know, being a high priestess of a coven it should be about, you know, we're human. We're not infallible. We're not some superhero but you're right. You have this vision because the high priestess in the coven I was trained in, she was academic. She's just this amazingly smart woman but she was so compassionate and she always had the right answer. Mm-hmm. But I also saw a vulnerability in her at times, and I also saw her make mistakes because we make mistakes, and that was actually so endearing to me. And she would point it out. She'd be like, yeah, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I make mistakes all the time, and it's just how it is. And it was when she showed that part rather than trying to cover it up, because some people will try to cover it up. They're like, oh, don't look at the man behind the curtain, you know.
For me, kind of a turning point was starting to teach in public school classrooms and working with kids, and not so much little ones, but I spent most of the time with juniors and seniors, and 17 and 18-year-olds, like, you cannot bullshit them. Like, they know when you're full of it, okay? And I figured out pretty quickly that you were much better off if you were just upfront with your kids when, like, you did something wrong or you didn't know something or you fucked up somewhere. Like, kids are infinitely forgiving. It's why they're so easily taken advantage of, right? It's because they're just infinitely forgiving. And I've got, like, tough 17 and 18-year-olds. They think they're grown, right? Like, but they're kids. And I took a lot of those lessons back to my interactions in my coven. Not because anybody who I work with is a child, but because I learned how to be, I think, more honest through working with children. And I learned how important it was to, like, point out my mistakes, not in a self-deprecating, I'm terrible way, but, like, you know, if you can point to something, you know, and say, oh, I messed up here, like, here's what I should have done, or let's do this instead, that's going to win you more respect in the long run than pretending that it didn't happen.
It's saying I don't know to an answer can be the most powerful educational answer. If someone comes to me and says, you know, what is this or what is that? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Let's look it up. Or, you know, like.
I think one of my favorites lately has been the idea that I don't know enough to come to an informed conclusion is an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
Because I think with the online world, like, you're expected to know so much about everything that sometimes you're allowed to say, I'm not picking a side. I don't know enough to actually have an informed opinion.
I don't know the
answer. I had a funny experience a few months ago where one of the folks who I initiated now runs their own coven, and they had somebody in outer court who asked a question. I don't remember what the question was. They had some question about the tradition, and my initiate calls me up and goes, Thorn, like, I can't recall you ever talking about this. Like, do you know the answer to this question? And I went, you know what? I sure don't. And I called my high priestess telephone. But what was so funny is I got the answer. I relay it back. And this person in outer court thought that it was the coolest thing. And it made them feel like they were part of a chain, right? Supported. Rather than just like, oh, here's this wise person who has all the answers. Like, no, you're part of something bigger and cooler because it's lots of people.
Yes. That's awesome. I like that you make that person feel included in that chain of events. Of what?
A web.
It's a beautiful web, everybody.
It's a web.
I want to emphasize too that that's not just covens. That's not just people with like traditional lineages. That's you and your community. That's something that I made people very mad. A couple of years ago, I made a comment in a video about how when you read a book, you fundamentally have a kind of relationship with that author. Mm-hmm. And what I meant by that, people were like, no, I don't have to know this author. Like, I can just be alone in my room reading the book, and that doesn't involve interaction with other people. And I was like, no, that's not what I said.
Oh.
When you consume something out of somebody else's brain, you are necessarily interacting with another person. Yeah. And become part of whatever their experiences are, their thoughts. That puts you in conversation with them.
Yes.
So that web includes what you are reading, the YouTubers you watch, your favorite Instagrammers, whatever the hell it is. Like, that's your community, everybody, like it or not.
Exactly. I really quick, because we try to keep our videos to an hour because people have ADD, including me. Really quick, you had mentioned in one of your videos, and this just because I'm a music freak, that you were in bands and now you were in punk bands and stuff like that. I just love that. I'm a music freak.
Got my SG right here. I actually played in an all-girl AC/DC cover band in a bar for a while. I was Angus, obviously. I dropped out of music school. I was in a jazz studies program for about 2 years, and I was like, why am I pretending to be able to play jazz? I'm much too incompetent to be here. But yeah, I started playing guitar when I was, I guess, 13, right around the same time I picked up Wicca.
Yeah.
And I always played in bands, and I was very serious about it growing up. I thought I was going to be a musician. This was like my whole life. And then I went to college, and like, I have never done anything harder than music school. Like, music school is like the most soul crushing, like life destroying experience ever.
Wow. Is it competitive or?
It is the most competitive discipline I've ever been a part of. And it's one of and it was great for me in the sense that it gave me a lot to, I guess, think about. And I had to build a new relationship with the guitar. And it turned into like, kind of like with witchcraft and expertise. Like you'll find if you read my books, I use music as an example all the time. And it's because you don't have to be a virtuoso guitar player to love music. And to be the guy at the campfire singing everybody's favorite song and making everybody happy.
Yeah.
When you're playing a show at a punk club, nobody gives a shit, right? Like, if you know all of your theory and if you blah, 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 nobody cares. Nobody went to music school. And like, sometimes that's a detriment to everybody. And I really had to get my head around that. So I think it's a lot like witchcraft. Like, it's not about being the best at something. It's about being I hate to even use the word competent enough, but okay, but being competent enough that you can find a way to bring yourself joy with it.
Yes.
Like, is there a way for me to love the instrument where I'm not just like going home and crying because I've been in a practice room for 6 hours and I haven't seen the sun and I still suck compared to everyone else?
Because I've done some music stuff. I used to play piano when I was really little, but it's like, if you're playing guitar and you're playing it for fun, no one cares if you learn the song by tabs or not.
Yeah.
You learn it by tablature, they don't care. You can learn how to read music. That's cool too. But if you learned it from tablature, you're still fine.
Can you play us just a little AC/DC still? Can you play a little riff?
If you can hear it, yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite was Girls Got Rhythm.
Yeah.
Do you know it?
Yep. We like AC/DC over here.
Yeah. I don't know if I could remember the solo. Right? Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, we got Thorn to play some AC/DC. I love it. I love it.
That on the internet.
What?
I don't think I've ever done that on the internet. That's
Well, welcome to Witches and Wine. We get you to do things.
Mhm.
We get you to do things.
In vino veritas.
In vino veritas. Click and drink to
They
AC/DC.
never sell wine at like bars, at dive bars and punk clubs, right?
Yeah.
It was just like PBR in a can.
Oh.
I've done shows where they would pay you in PBR in a can, and I'm just like, I cannot drink this.
Yeah.
Just,
I used to go watch a lot of live shows, and we had ones here where it was 50-cent beer night, and they just wanted you to get drunk so the music sounded better, because some of these punk bands, because I love punk.
that's a valid strategy.
Yes, it's a great strategy.
My daughter and I were talking about this. Like, when it comes to punk stuff, you don't actually go to it because the music is necessarily good.
You go because
you're not, yeah, because she was talking about, like, she was like, there was a Riot Girl song, and people were like, this is terrible. I'm like, it's not supposed to be good. It's punk.
It's punk.
Well, and I think it's, again, I'm always relating it to witchcraft, and I do this in the new book, especially. I talk a lot about music and witchcraft. Do you like the segue I just gave you? Yeah.
Yes. She was going to ask you some questions. Yeah, but please.
Like, with like kind of going to the punk club, and it's not like you're kind of pleasantly surprised if the band is good. You know, like that's how I feel about open rituals and like festivals and group events. I'm not going because I think it's going to be the best ritual that's ever happened to me. Like, if it is, awesome. And I've been to some amazing public rituals, but you go because the collective energy, the possibility of who you're going to meet and the things you might learn. It doesn't matter if the ritual sucks. People are always like, well, I'm a traditional witch. I don't want to go to the druid, bardic circle, whatever. And I'm just like, go, because there's going to be some other jaded traditional witch standing there across the room with his arms crossed, waiting for your ass to show up.
Go. Oh, she's not.
No, that's not me. I'm relating because I have been in those circles, having the eyes cast upon me, going, is this one gonna be good?
Yes.
Is this one gonna be good?
Well, our coven did a public ritual for Beltane a few years ago, and we were so tired of the naysayers because we actually, before we did this ritual, a group of us pagans got together and put out a survey to what would make you show up to a ritual, or why do you not show up to public rituals? And we got great feedback, but a lot of the feedback was either the rituals are they take themselves too seriously, or they're not serious enough. So no, exactly, right? And there was everything in between, just, and it was a lot of complaining, and it was so we decided when we did our public Beltane ritual, we had a complaints department, and we opened up with, if you have any complaints about today's ritual.
And they're incredibly important to us.
And they're very important to us. You can go to our complaints department, and we held a sign up, complaints department, and it pointed to the lake.
That's really fun.
And we all pointed, if you have any complaints, please file a complaint with the complaints department. And we all pointed to the lake, and we're like, it's at the bottom of the lake. Okay, so like...
Delightful.
Some didn't, but
well,
you know what?
People come looking for the wrong thing.
Yes.
Or maybe it's not that they come looking for the wrong thing. They come looking for a very narrow idea of what the right thing is.
Yes.
Like, go with this idea in your head that you could meet somebody amazing, or go with this idea that, I don't know, like,
there is a doorway. It's not meant to be the be all end all. It's meant for you to make connections. Maybe you'll get to see that, oh, I have been casting circle the correct way this entire time. I was really concerned I was doing it wrong. But this is how they do it here too, and this is a group of other pagans, so I must not be doing it completely wrong, at least.
Well,
you know?
yeah, it's about making relationships and experiencing things with your community. But if you go in there with a bad attitude, and we know those people that go there and they just they're closed to anything.
Some of it's just expectation versus reality.
Yeah.
And some is a very narrow mindset of what your definition is of whatever thing you're looking for.
But they never have a good time. That's the thing, is that they're setting themselves up a lot of times to miss out on some great connections. And so we just try to make it fun for them and easy to interact. But we want to get to your book. Okay, we're gonna do shameless plug.
Book.
So
talk about your books.
Your most recent book. Would you like to tell us what that is? And is that the one you read?
I was starting to read the Traditional Wicca, A Seeker's Guide. I've not read it yet. I tried to start reading it, and I got interrupted a whole bunch. But I did buy it. I bought it.
Oh, you're muted.
I am muted. That's okay.
I was like,
I tried reading it, and it sucked.
No.
It's fine.
I literally, it's been on my wish list for ages. And I finally bought it like day before yesterday. And then I was like, I'm going to read the introduction before this interview. And I sat down to do the introduction, and I got, hey, mom. And I'm like, I can't do this right now. I'll do it tomorrow when I'm in school.
She's got 5 kids. 5.
That's a lot of kids.
That's a lot of distractions.
I hope they're good
ones.
books. I hope they're good kids.
They're awesome kids. They're actually really good kids.
So in 2018, I published with Llewellyn Traditional Wicca, A Seeker's Guide, which is specifically about the process of joining a traditional Wiccan coven. And I'm pretty broad about what I mean. It's not just a book if you want to be a Gardnerian or an Alexandrian. I'm thinking more about like initiatory kind of coven-based groups.
Yes.
And in retrospect, I think it would apply to other traditions of witchcraft that are also
any initiatory.
Some things in there too. Like there's a lot of stuff about group dynamics and recognizing a good group and recognizing an unhealthy group. Stuff like we were just talking about, like what kind of attitude should you have when you go to public events. It's fundamentally about meeting other people, like getting involved with other people. So if you're interested in group work, and I wrote it kind of as an update because for those of us who practice in traditional settings, a lot of the books that we're reading are like 30 years old. And I was like, I need a book to point seekers to that they can read. So I'm not just like, go read Gerald Gardner. Like, that's okay. Like, they're going to do that. They're not, right?
No.
My second book is for everyone. I wanted to write something that was kind of just about being a witch. It's called The Witch's Path, Advancing Your Craft at Every Level. And it's about plateaus. It's about what happens when you get stuck. And what's cool about it is that it's for everyone, because I have this sort of working theory that regardless of how much experience you have in witchcraft, if this is the second book you've picked up, if you've been practicing for 20 years, like whatever, no matter what kind of witch you are, if you're Wiccan, if you think of yourself as non-religious, or you're a traditional witch, or you're just exploring, whatever, everybody has these moments where they feel stuck. As a beginner, feeling stuck looks like being overwhelmed. Like there's so much out there. What do I read? Am I doing it right? I'm afraid I've been trying my first ritual. What if I screw something up? How do I approach gods? Are gods even real?
Yeah.
Whereas there are more advanced folks who they're bored, they're jaded, their community sucks, right? Like, is there anything else to learn? Every book is the same fucking book, right? Like, I'm tired of reading the same stuff. You know what I mean? Like those folks. And I spent a good decade being there.
Yeah.
And then there's also folks who they're coven leaders and they're burned out. And like they've been running groups for a long time, and maybe their personal practice kind of like is in a dumpster somewhere. It's in the lake.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to speak to everybody. So what I do is I kind of look at the core, what I think of as like kind of the core ideas, things that come up over and over again in witchcraft spaces, regardless of what kind of witchcraft we're talking about. Like, we talk a lot about magic. Like, what the hell is magic? We talk a lot about ritual. We talk a lot about community. We talk about study. Everybody's always like, oh, study. Oh, do the work. Nobody tells you what the hell any of that means, right?
Yeah.
We talk a lot about devotion. We have different ideas about devotion, like, do I have to work with gods? What about land spirits? What about ancestors? All of the stuff, the sacred self. Like, our ideas are different, but the core concepts, I think, are the same. So I've pulled out my classroom teacher hat, and I kind of like how you differentiate with kids in a classroom. If I've got a classroom of juniors, I'm going to have some students who English is their second language, they're English language learners. I'm going to have honor students. I'm going to have kids who only show up to class once every week or two. Like, I'm going to have a mix of kids, and I'm responsible for all of them. I have to put all of them forward. And I thought, I can do this with a witchcraft book. So each core concept has differentiated exercises in it that you can choose based on where you think you are. So you might be totally new to like devotion, but you might be a great ritualist. Like, maybe you pick different kinds of exercises, right? You might be an old hand at, like, you might be, you know, a librarian who knows all about research. So like the study chapter, no problemo, but you suck navigating community spaces. I wanted something that anybody could pick up and get something out of, over and over again as they advanced.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. It took me about 2 years to write. It kind of kicked my ass. I'm very excited about it. I'm also very nervous about it. It's a very personal book. But it'll be out this fall.
It's available for pre-order.
Yes, it is available for pre-order. Please pre-order. Pre-orders are important. And you can do that pretty much wherever you would like. If you want to go through a local metaphysical store, if you want to go to Llewellyn directly, if you want to go through Amazon or Books A Million or Barnes & Noble or whatever, pick your poison. Please drink it.
Well, where are you? Do you have I know you're obviously YouTube. Do you have a website? Do you anywhere to refer us to go find out more about you? Or is it...
If you would like to communicate with me through pictures, you may find me on Instagram at Thorn the Witch. And it's just one word. Thorn does not have an E on it. I'm also not Thorin the dwarf. I'm not that cool. Thorn the Witch. And if you can find me under that handle on pretty much any social media platform, but I'm most active on Instagram and YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm on Twitter as Tarot Skeptic. But if you search Thorn Mooney, I come right up.
Yeah.
Because Tarot Skeptic was your blog, like,
many years ago.
Before this stuff. Before, I think that was like pre-YouTube, actually, too.
No.
They were kind of hand in hand.
So I started reading tarot and kind of flirted with the idea of doing it professionally and did it kind of semi-professionally. I read out of a shop for a while and I did online readings for a while. After graduate school, I realized I wasn't ready to go on and do PhD work. I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do. So I was like, fuck it, let's be a fortune teller. Yeah. I actually said that during my master's defense, by the way. Like, the room of advisors had to clap, like, yes, we've conferred the degree upon you. And they asked me what I was going to do with it. And I told them I was going to be an internet fortune teller. That went over real well.
Swimmingly, I'm sure.
And that's when I set up Tarot Skeptic. But my approach to tarot, I think, was, I just kind of didn't have the energy to do a lot of public readings. Yeah. It's very difficult. It's emotionally taxing, and it just wasn't something that was for me. But I've been Thorn the Witch since probably like 2007.
It's a long time.
Yeah, because I was on LiveJournal first.
Yeah.
On Blogger, and then I was on WordPress. And I started the YouTube channel in, I think, 2010 or 2010.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even 2009. And then I accidentally started writing books. Actually, it wasn't an accident. I wanted to write books, but
Yeah.
yes.
When you do did you have any idea? Because you have a lot of followers and a lot of people. Because your platform, I guess, or the way you do it is just your thoughts. I love when you're sitting in your car because that's so like
It's one of the things I've always appreciated, especially with the like non-edited, because I don't have the time to do that. If I'm going to do a video, I don't have the spoons for it.
No.
To use the spoony theory, I just don't. I just want to be stream of consciousness, put it out there.
Yeah, and
So
that's what you do.
it.
Yeah, if I had to edit and like be pro about it, I just wouldn't do it.
No.
It's better to just get it out there. And like there are things that I could do, I think, that would like bump me up in the algorithm on YouTube. Like there are certain things you can do that make your video like more pronounced for people. But I just don't, it's not that I don't care, I do care. But that's just not who I set out to be. Like YouTube was very different when I first started. It was very community based. Like the term content creator shows up like a few years ago. Like not even a few years ago. It's really only been in my vocabulary for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But they used to just call us bloggers.
Yeah.
And the point was you shared your life.
Yeah.
I miss the days. It was one of the, I hated it because I started doing my YouTube channel, which is very much neglected, because I wanted to be able to do video responses.
That was
And
it.
I was
Me too.
I was up doing video responses for like a couple of months, and then they went, no more video responses. I actually did one to one of your videos at one point in time that was basically, the terms we call ourselves was basically, it's a bunch of witchcraft. Because that was the whole Wicca, traditional witch, witchcraft.
Yeah, well, and my very first YouTube video, because it was the same for me. I wanted to be able to make video responses. YouTube did not look the way it looks now. It was very personalized. You could kind of manipulate your page. It looked a lot more like something like MySpace.
Yeah.
And you could choose like color schemes and themes and whatever, and you could do linked video responses like in chains. Wow. I wanted to be able to respond to people because I watched a lot of great pagan YouTubers who were just people, young people mostly, like myself at the time, like just talking about, because it's not like, I didn't have a coven at the time. It's not like I could go point at other people and be like, yes, I'm doing it right, or yes, I can learn whatever. I was limited to books and my own brain. Yeah. And there was YouTube. And I found that the way I practiced Wicca, I wasn't yet an initiate, but I knew that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to pursue specifically Gardnerian Wicca. And I found that people didn't have the same perspective I did. And it wasn't because I thought my perspective was the best, but I wanted to kind of throw my 2 cents in.
Yeah. It was more of a conversation, which that was part of the fun, is because you could have a video response and then they could respond back to you. And
in the morning you would have a video response, and it was like having a chat with somebody. And now everything is so polished and like it's all about information and teaching people.
Well, and also, I look at all different pagan YouTubers and
the monetization of like everything.
Yeah. But I also noticed that aesthetically, they are doing, like, I see a lot of, and no offense to those that are doing this, if this is how you want to do it, but again, so not us, was these women, like, doing witchcraft in their lingerie. Like, I was just seeing a lot of that.
I have never seen that.
Oh my gosh. Maybe I got referred to the wrong sites. I don't know, but there was a lot of that where it was like sexy witchcraft, and it was this whole like.
There was a period, I think I know what you're talking about. There was a period a few years ago where there was a lot of crossover between like witch YouTube, like pagan YouTube, and like beauty YouTube. Like there were some popular beauty YouTubers who came out as witches of some sort, which is great. Yeah. And so you saw that cross content. It's not that we're like out there deliberately trying to like sexify their witchcraft, and not that that's a problem, as I turn into Seinfeld, sorry, but like I'm
totally
that stuff was already there. like the beauty shots, the lingerie stuff, the sexy stuff was already there.
Yeah.
And the witchcraft stuff was an added component of their lives. And in some ways, like that's awesome. But I think for other people, mostly because like that's the stuff that gets bumped up in the algorithm, I think what it did to folks who'd been around for a while, the folks who were just like talking about whatever and then shooting up on their phone, their webcams, right? Because we didn't have smartphones.
Yeah.
I think it kind of minimized those conversations because nobody was watching those videos anymore.
Yeah.
And those videos were like nobody was watching. Like they don't come up when you search. Like you used to just be able to search pagan YouTube and you'd get lots of folks who you could be part of a conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with, folks who do things differently.
No.
But I think people miss feeling like it was an equal playing field. Like nobody ever used to ask about how many followers you had. And like monetization wasn't a thing. And then they introduced this idea of being a YouTube partner, which is kind of like how they rolled out monetization.
Yeah.
And like I qualified for monetization like 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I didn't make any money from YouTube until like this year when I suddenly got like $40 for something. Like it's people think that folks are just like getting rich off of it or something. And so that's what they do. And as a classroom teacher, my kids would tell me that they wanted to be YouTubers. Like we'd have career day or whatever. And everybody wanted to be an influencer or a YouTuber.
That's my kids for a while. My boys, they were like, I want to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, what the?
Well, and I would tell them, go be a YouTuber. Like you can do it now. Do you have a channel? What's your channel? And they go, what do you mean? And I was like, well, you can set up a channel.
Yeah.
Do you want to be a YouTuber or not?
Especially because if you're going to be a YouTuber, like often enough, some of that is luck, right? Like I think some of the game YouTubers,
oh my God,
gamer YouTubers,
those
like,
are
it was luck because they started playing a specific game and doing the Let's Plays at the right time, and it just
it's taken off. It's taken off. Oh my gosh, that's what my kid, they love to watch people play video games. I feel like an old lady. I'm like, I don't understand, but whatever. I mean, I guess it's better than.
I mean, as far as pagan YouTube goes, I remember like the first time I came across Tiptoe Chick.
Yeah.
And I miss her dearly.
Yeah.
But it was like this whole new world opened up on pagan YouTube of like there's videos of witches. This is cool.
Yeah. Well, so we're a little over an hour. I'm gonna go ahead and I could sit here and talk to you forever. We actually teach a class after this, so we have to get into our teacher online mode.
Put our teacher hat on.
But thank you, Thorn. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed yourself. This has been amazing, and you have so much. Again, your format, I love it. It's just you. You're thinking of things and you're talking about them, and it's so relatable. You really hit a niche with certain people that just I feel like you're saying things that we were thinking, and we're not going to throw you under the bus, and you won't get fired from your job from us. So
I'm not worried about it. I'm essentially at my job. Nobody else can do what I do at my company because I'm the aggressive American.
There you go.
Who's going to deliver the bad news? Me.
Right? You. There's a niche for that. Well, before we go, if any of our viewers would like to know more about our coven, more about the classes we offer, our show, you can email us at
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
What was that again?
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Thorn. Amazing guest. We love to have you back. Everyone, remember, be so kind to one another. Always walk with the goddess. And until next time, blessed be. Have a great night, everybody. We love you.
Bye, everybody. All right.